Hello everybody, welcome. On November 19th of 2016, the now infamous Bob Paycheck stood up in front of a crowded room at Disney's Destination D23 Expo and announced that major changes were coming to EPCOT. So here we are nearly 8 years later, and what did we ultimately end up with? And more importantly, what did we lose? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today as we take a look at EPCOT then versus now. This video should hopefully be a lot of fun. We're going to take a trip down memory lane. We're going to look at all the things that EPCOT had before. We're going to do some objective assessments to try to take a look at, are we getting something better? Did we get something better than what we had before? So don't get too angry with me if we start to get into some of the details. You can have a different opinion. It's okay, but we should have a lot of fun. I hope you enjoy kind of going with me on this trip down memory lane and seeing all the cool things that EPCOT used to have and unlock some of those core memories that maybe you had about EPCOT. There's gonna be some really cool stuff in here, some things that I had even forgotten about, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember that, that was so awesome. I miss a lot of the stuff. So it should be a lot of fun, so let's just get right into it. Progress is impossible without change. That famous quote by Walt Disney tells us a little bit about Walt Disney. It tells us that Walt Disney himself believed that change is good. In fact, it was Walt Disney himself that also said Disneyland, and by extension Disney World, will never be completed. It will continue to grow as long as there is imagination left in this world. So if Walt Disney believed all of that, then that begs the question, why do so many Disney fans get upset when Disney makes changes? Well, there's a couple of reasons for that, and let's dig into them really quickly. The first one is, it threatens their memories. People have memories of Disney, trips, vacations, things that they did when they were younger, or things that they did when they brought their kids there, or their parents, things like that. It threatens their memories when things change. It's like going to your favorite restaurant and ordering your favorite dish for years and years, and then suddenly one day you go to that restaurant and your favorite dish is gone. It doesn't feel great, right? You don't love that experience. You don't love when that happens. You may actually never even go to that restaurant again if that happens. Which leads us to our second point, which is they also want other people to experience the things that they experienced. So I think of things as like when I was a kid and I would go to Disney, I would bring my kids there, and I want them to experience the same things that I experienced and get all that joy and happiness out of it. Which leads us to our third point, which is fear. People are afraid. They're afraid that what comes after may not be as good as what came before. And that leads us to the main point of this video, which is what Walt Disney himself once said. Progress is impossible without change. And I want to hone in on the word progress. The word progress means moving forward, not backwards, not sideways, and definitely not standing still or running in place. It means moving forward. It means that what comes after needs to be better than what came before. Sometimes diehard Disney fans will use Walt Disney's words himself to actually defend Disney, even if what comes after is garbage. No offense to diehard Disney fans, because I'm one myself, but that's not what Walt Disney was all about. In fact, if you know anything about Walt Disney's Imagineers, Walt Disney's creative process, even when his Imagineers would come to him and think they had nailed it, they had nailed their pitch, they nailed their idea for an attraction or a theme or whatever, they had nailed it, Walt Disney would sort of quietly sit there, he'd smile, and then he'd say, this is great, but now plus it. If you've ever heard of the words plussing it or the term plussing, this came from Walt Disney, which is basically him saying, this is good, but I want it to be great. I want you to go even beyond what you thought was great and go even better than great. That was Walt Disney. I once read an article by the Dark Herald, and I want to make sure I get this quote right. He said, Bob Chapek is the first CEO to introduce minusing it, an aggressive pursuit of unimaginative mediocrity. I thought that was the most amazing quote that sums up some of the things that have been happening with Disney over the past few years, and definitely under Bob Paycheck / Bob Cheapheck. Yeah, it was rough. So when we look at the massive EPCOT transformation that's just occurred, I sort of want to break that down. I want to try and take emotions out of the equation, because I have some strong opinions and some strong emotions on what I feel has happened in this transformation. But I kind of want to take that out and look at this very objectively, because diehard Disney fans like me, we run on emotion. And you know, we fear change. We don't love change because we're afraid that things are not going to be as good as they were before. And so a lot of times when we see something new, we think about the memory that we had, and we connect the two, and we think the memory was better than the new thing. And so I'm really trying to disconnect a lot of that emotion, and I want to go through all the things that EPCOT had then versus what they have now, and try to objectively decide which one is better. Did we gain something, or did we lose something? Did we gain something better, or did we just get a side grade? Because EPCOT spent a lot of time and a lot of money on this transformation. These walls have been up for years and years and years. They spent multi-millions of dollars on this transformation. So let's go back to the timeline. How long has this been happening? So as I said, November 19th, 2016. It's like 8 years ago almost, where this was first announced, when Bob Paycheck said, I can't even hardly say his name correctly, Bob Chapek said there's going to be a huge transformation to EPCOT coming. And they did start working on a bunch of things like Remy's Ratatouille Adventure, Cosmic Rewind, Guardians of the Galaxy, which I have to say, Guardians of the Galaxy, Cosmic Rewind, which replaced Universe of Energy, which, by the way, I loved. And when I first heard they were getting rid of Universe of Energy, I was sick. Like, that's, again, a diehard Disney fan. I was like, I have so many memories of that. I love that experience. My kids love that experience, and I was sick about it. But they gave us Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind, which, to me, is way better than Universe of Energy. It's probably my favorite attraction in all of Disney. I love it. Now, other people may say Universe of Energy was better. That's okay. You can have that opinion. But for me, it was better. It felt better. I get a lot more out of it. I would ride Universe of Energy maybe a few times a year. Cosmic Rewind, I've ridden over 100 times already since it's opened. Literally, I'm not making that number up. Over 100 times I've ridden that ride. So that's an example of progress, forward momentum. Universe of Energy, Cosmic Rewind, that's forward. It's better to me, and I think to a lot of people. Then in August 25th of 2019 is when they actually came out and started to announce the other areas of transformation around EPCOT, giving us the 4 distinct areas like World Celebration, World Nature, all of those, World Discovery, and obviously World Showcase. And so they were transforming a lot of that space, talking about the journey to water with Moana, inspired by Moana, all the different things like the Fountain of Nations going away and the gardens replacing it, the creation shop, all that stuff coming to fruition. So now that we're at about 5 years ago, which is when all this started to be announced in that central space where basically World Celebration was going to start coming to life. And then September 8th of 2019 is when Innoventions officially closed. And then over the next few months, they slowly started closing other things like MouseGear, the big store there. They also closed down the electric umbrella, RIP on the electric umbrella. And then in April 9th, 2021, they started making announcements of all the things that are going to be coming and replacing all the things that they started closing, like the creation shop and the Connections Eatery. Those announcements were made. So for 5 years, we had walls all through the entire center area of EPCOT. You literally, when you went into EPCOT, you had to go way left or you had to go way right, and there was really no center area anymore. It made getting between areas, like going between Living Seas with Nemo or Soarin', all the way over to where Test Track and Mission Space are, it was a haul. Like, you had to go around a lot of stuff. It was very inconvenient. Even going into EPCOT, you had to kind of make big details. You started having to snake around detours to actually get over to Test Track. But we had to deal with that for 5 years. Like, it looked clunky. You know, nobody likes the experience of like a bunch of walls everywhere. So on June 10th of 2024, just a few days ago, the walls finally came down and they essentially announced that the EPCOT transformation is complete. That doesn't mean they're not going to keep doing things to EPCOT, but that was sort of marked the official end of all the announcements and everything that they said they were going to do. So let's dig in and look at EPCOT then versus now, And so let's see what we ended up with. So what I want to do is go through each one of the elements of what was in these spaces at EPCOT then versus now, and to sort of make a determination on which one was better. Did we get an upgrade, or did we just sort of get a side grade or a downgrade? And then give a plus, so basically assign a +1 to anything that we feel is better. So by the end of this, hopefully we'll have a somewhat objective assessment of all the things that we've lost and all the things that we've gained. So let's just start, let's go through them all. So the first thing I want to talk about is MouseGear versus the Creation Shop. So MouseGear was the really cool, sort of basically the main shopping hub for EPCOT in the center there. They had this really cool building called MouseGear, which essentially was the shopping destination. And it really looked cool in there. It had such character. I loved the actual aesthetic and the character of that store. Something that I believe Disney has lost a lot of, especially at EPCOT and some of the hotel refurbs and things that they're doing. They're removing all the character from Disney. They're saying that they're modernizing things, but they're really just adding a bunch of white, just some modern aesthetic, but it's also losing some of its character. And it's actually funny because MouseGear was actually, I think it actually said something like shopping with character or something like that was what their little tagline was. And I just loved it. It had all this like, I don't know, like almost like steampunk type things, like gears and cogs and characters from Disney, everything built into it. It really looked fun in that shop. I really loved the way it looked. I'm not saying they couldn't modernize that a bit, because you look back at it now and it looks a little older school, but it still looks really cool. So you could have easily just kind of refurbed it and refreshed it. Now it's important to know that the MouseGear location and subsequently the Creation Shop and all that stuff that's there now with the Connections Eatery, that was actually Innoventions East. There's also Innoventions West, which is what we'll talk about in a little bit. So Innoventions East, they actually kept those buildings fairly intact, and all they did was gut them and refurb on the inside. So MouseGear was part of that. It was really cool. They could have easily just refurbed it, but instead we got the Creation Shop. And I will say the Creation Shop, I love the Creation Shop. It's bigger than the MouseGear's location was, but it is also very modern and very sort of plain and vanilla in there. So if I'm looking at those two locations side by side, which one do I think was better? It's a tough call for me. It kind of could go either way. But if I had to say, I really liked the character that MouseGear sort of brought to the table. I believe that it was stronger than what is in the Creation Shop. I think Creation Shop, the size of it is nicer, and it feels more modern. But I feel like they could have easily just refreshed MouseGear on the inside without having to shut down that entire wing, shut down that entire building for years and years, and adding to all the walls and things that were up. They could have easily just refreshed MouseGear. So if I had to give it to MouseGear's or Creation Shop, I'm gonna lean towards MouseGear. I feel like MouseGear gets the +1 in this one for me because it just looks better. I really like the actual aesthetic of the store. Size-wise, it wasn't as big, but I feel like I said, they could have just refreshed it and modernized it a little bit, and it would have been fine, because we essentially lost all that space in that entire wing for a long period of time. The next one is Electric Umbrella. Probably one of my favorite places at EPCOT to eat. I just loved Electric Umbrella. Again, it had a lot of character. It just felt really good. It was in a nice spot. Again, they could have easily maybe refurbed it a little bit. Maybe got rid of the carpet, maybe improved it. But size-wise, it was deceivingly large. There was actually multiple stories there. So there was a, first and second floor. You could eat upstairs or downstairs. There was a lot of outside seating as well, which you think in Florida, you're like, I don't really want to eat outside, but it's actually nice to eat outside for a good portion of the year in Florida. So they had a lot of outdoor seating for the restaurant, a good amount of indoor seating for the restaurant, and it was a great location. It had a lot of character to it. I liked it. I thought it was great. It got replaced with the Connections Eatery. We'll talk about the Connections Cafe in a minute, but the Connections Eatery I think is also nice. But again, it's pretty plain. It feels very much like a cafeteria, and it doesn't have a lot of character to it. And so when I combine the fact that it doesn't have a ton of character, I love the Connections Eatery. It's great. The food there is actually great, but you could have easily just brought the food that's a Connections Eatery into the Electric Umbrella and done the same thing. So you didn't need to shut the entire place down shut the whole wing down, put all these walls up for a long period of time, just to do a little refresh of Electric Umbrella. And so, if I had to kind of compare the two, the Connections Eatery and the Electric Umbrella, I'm giving the nod to Electric Umbrella. Again, I just feel like it was a better experience. I just thought the restaurant was better, and they could have easily just done a refresh on it. So the other part of the Connections Eatery is the cafe. So Connections Cafe, which is essentially Starbucks. It's a Starbucks. That's all it is. It does have good seating in it, but we already had a Starbucks right on the opposite side over there by where Club Cool used to be. So for me, we had a Starbucks. We got a Starbucks. I don't really think it's that much better than the Starbucks that we had, although it is bigger. It's still Starbucks for Starbucks. So to me, that's kind of a wash. Which takes us to Club Cool. So Club Cool was on the other side, and then they moved it over to right next to the Creation Shop. Club Cool then was pretty cool. I actually liked it. I thought it was a great experience. You walked in, you had plenty of space in there. It was a pretty large location. You had these bays, these circular bays where you could actually walk around. You could get your drinks, no problem. What I really miss is the original Club Cool, which was called Ice Station Cool. If anybody remembers that, that was a cool version of Club Cool. They had this awesome, like, icy, what are those things? I don't know, snow tractors out front. You went through this little, like, ice cave. There was a caveman in there. I still remember seeing that for the first time and just thinking, what is that? There's a caveman frozen in ice, and then you went through and you exited into sort of this, like, Club Cool space. So I really liked that. I thought that experience was cool. But they did away with that, and they introduced the Club Cool. You get the free drinks and everything. I'm down for that. But I like the aesthetic of the original better. But overall, Club Cool was pretty good. Then they essentially shut that down, and they moved it, and they put up a new Club Cool over next to the Creation Shop, which is fine. It's good. It's not as big. But if I have to give the nod to one of the Club Cools, I'm going to go with the original again. The new one is fine, but all of the drink bays are along one wall, and it actually makes it really difficult to kind of get in and get a drink because everybody's like piled up and smashed against these walls. It's not as easy to kind of go in and grab a drink with those circular bays. The circular bays allowed a lot of people to kind of, go around it in a circle. There's more room to spread out, and you didn't feel as like compact trying to get a drink. So overall, to me, I think that the old Club Cool, that's getting a +1 for me. So let's talk now about the biggest thing right in the center of the park, which is the Fountain of Nations. The Fountain of Nations was an iconic fountain right there in the middle. It was an amazing water feature. It actually had it looked beautiful. And they actually did some stuff with it. And what's really cool about the Fountain of Nations that not a lot of people understand is that it actually was filled with water from 29 different countries. So the water that was in the Fountain of Nations when it was originally created, they took water from 29 different countries, like 25 different bodies of water across 29 countries, and actually filled the Fountain of Nations with that water. They also later added lights to it and water jets and things like that were synchronized, like 250, I think, water jets that were then synchronized with music and lights, and basically created a show about every 15 minutes. So it was a great feature, things that you could sort of like hang out and watch. It was a really cool thing. So that was replaced with the World Celebration Gardens, which in their own right are pretty nice. It's a garden with a lot of seating. We'll talk about the seating a little bit later, but the actual garden itself that replaced the fountain, it's just kind of plain. It's just a garden. It's a little quiet. There's not a lot of energy in the space. The fountains brought energy. The gardens themselves are okay. They have these big light pylons, which I think are nice. They could potentially do something with that. Maybe. It does seem like the lights kind of go in sync with what's going on with the Spaceship Earth ball, the EPCOT ball. And then there's some lighting on the ground, although a lot of the lighting has been broken and busted. So when I compare the two side by side, if I think Fountain of Nations, all the things that brought to the table versus the World Celebration Gardens, I gotta give the +1 to the Fountain of Nations. I gotta give it. You can argue the points. You're free to do that. This is just me based on objectivity, hopefully. A little bit of my opinion, of course. I'm partial to certain things. It's impossible to completely extract all the things that I feel about something, but I think just on the surface, it was better. So let's get a win in the now category. So one of the new things they added was Dreamer's Point, which includes the Walt Disney statue. And I think Dreamer's Point, there was no real equivalent to that in the previous version. And it is essentially an upgrade. It's something that they added. I think Dreamer's Point is a great addition to Epcot. It's a celebration of Walt Disney. It's a great photo opportunity there. It's an homage to him. I definitely feel like Dreamer's Point is an ad. I love the fact that he's sort of sitting there. He's overlooking the Epcot space. He's overlooking the World Showcase. I feel like Dreamer's Point was definitely a great ad. So it's getting a +1 for sure for that. Now let's switch over to Innoventions East. So Innoventions East, the big giant wing there that essentially now encompasses the Creation Shop and Connections Eatery. Basically, they gutted that building, but they really left the majority of that building intact, the exterior and everything like that. But Innoventions East, so yes, they replaced it with Club Cool and Creation Shop and Connections Eatery and all that, but we lost Innoventions East. And Innoventions East was awesome. It was just such a great place that had all these different interactive kiosks and elements. It was also sort of a flexible space. We'll talk about flexible space when it comes to the Communicore Plaza, but it was a flexible space. They would actually take sort of exhibits and attractions and things in and out of that space pretty regularly. They had the Sum of All Thrills in there. Test the Limits Lab. Colortopia was one of the more recent things that they added into that space. It was also really cool because if it was a rainy day or a super hot day, the entire thing was indoor. You could basically spend hours in the Innoventions wing when it was raining. There were just a lot of really cool interactive things to do in that space, and it was really big. So Innoventions East, definitely a +1 for that. But then we got Journey of Water inspired by Moana, which technically is part of World of Nature, not World Celebration, but we're going to include it because it's kind of in that space, and it did actually replace a big portion of Innoventions West. Journey of Water, there's no debating it. It's a +1. It's a great experience. I love it. I think it's beautiful. I love Moana. It's a cool little interactive walkthrough. It's not something that I will personally do more than a couple of times. I think it would have been better, and I've said this before, I think Journey into Water would have been better if it would have actually been a walk-through garden that had multiple entrances and exits that you could kind of just walk in and walk out, because then I personally would have probably walked through it much more often on my way between attractions. Like maybe I'm on my way from the entrance over to the land pavilion. Maybe a nice little walk-through journey into water would have been really easy for me to do. And I decided I'm going to kind of take a nice little path through Journey into Water, see some of the sights, maybe play with some of the water. Because it's a self-contained attraction, there's an entrance, it's a loop, and then you come out of the exit in the same spot as the entrance pretty much. I don't really have a lot of use for it. It kind of is out of the way at that point. So I have to go out of my way to go in, walk through this sort of circle, and then arrive back where I was. They just didn't think through it that well. So for me, Journey into Water could have been better than it is, but it's still a nice ad. It's great. So it's getting a +1 for sure. So that brings us back to Innoventions West. Again, there was a lot of cool things, very similar to Innoventions East, just different exhibits in there. There was a cool video game playground in there, interactive experience. A thing called Where's the Fire, where you kind of learned about things. Again, it was edutainment. It was entertainment that was educational, which was fun. You got to walk in and kind of like find the fire, and there was a fire truck there, and it was great for kids. There was a cool piggy bank game there that actually taught you how to like save money, and I remember my daughter loved the piggy bank. She just loved that game. So there was a lot of really interesting things and fun stuff to do in Innoventions West. Again, you could spend hours in there. So before we score Innoventions West, I want to go over to the Communicore Hall and Plaza and compare the two, because the Communicore really is a big part of what replaced Innoventions West. So we ended up with going from Innoventions West, which I have to also say, I didn't cover. Innoventions West also had another indoor section that wasn't part of the interactive playgroundy kind of areas inside, where there actually was seating. There was indoor seating, tables, chairs, comfortable places to sit along this sort of like strip. There were bathrooms that you could access that were indoor, a great place to get out of the heat and just kind of hang out and relax. It had a lot of things going for it. The Communicore Hall and Plaza is okay. It's fine. I'll be honest and say that I feel like the actual flex space itself, the concept art for sure, doesn't really look anything like what we ended up getting. They made a lot of budget cuts. They had to pull back a lot. I think they didn't know what to do, if I'm being totally transparent. They went from this amazing Innoventions West building that was perfect. It was symmetrical with Innoventions East. It had a nice sight lines that it created in the center there. Awesome lighting effects. Everything was just really cool looking. They ripped that awesome building down, and then they decided they had to make budget cuts, and they were like, what do we do? I feel like they gave us a hospital cafeteria. That's what we ended up with. So the flex space looks to me like a hospital cafeteria. I don't know what else to say about it. It's not great. That's not getting a +1 for me. So Innoventions West definitely gets the +1 in this column. So we also had a location called the Character Spot over there by Spaceship Earth. There was Goofy and I think Pluto, different characters that you could meet there. A little character spot, meet and greet. We ended up getting Mickey and Friends, a little location in the Communicore Plaza there. So kind of a 1-for-1 experience. The meet and greet versus the character spot. I don't know that I can really give either side a +1 on that. It's kind of a net neutral thing. We're just going to zero that one out. Now there's also the Encanto stage show, the Encanto Plaza there, where the show is. There's also more than that. There's also a different show there that runs tonight. They'll be able to use that as a flex space. They'll have different shows there. I'm sure they'll rotate shows out. They do have a daytime and a nighttime show, which is nice, which we weren't sure about, but now we know there is, and so they can actually use the lighting. There's patches of green space where you can kind of sit. There's more seating. I think for the festivals, it's going to be kind of a cool energy place. They might be able to use it for DJ booth or something at New Year's. So overall, that sort of Encanto Plaza there, I'm giving that a +1 for sure because it's really cool. I think they're going to be able to use it for some neat stuff. I still feel like maybe more of it should be covered. They should do a better job of covering because it gets really hot right there. But overall, it's definitely better. It's a +1 for me. So there was also the Art of Disney over in Innoventions East. That was essentially just moved to the American Pavilion back in the back. We did end up losing Heritage Manor, which was a shop that was back there. So we ended up losing that because the Art of Disney replaced that. So again, I'm thinking that's a wash. It just sort of moved to another location. But then we also, as part of the transformation, got the EPCOT beacon, the little lights that are added to the Spaceship Earth EPCOT ball. Even though it didn't really replace anything, and they could have done this regardless. So they could have added those lights to the Spaceship Earth regardless. They didn't need to put all those walls up around everything and detract from the experience for 5 years to put those lights on the ball. Even though they could do that regardless if they left World Celebration as is, I'm still giving it a +1 because it's a major add. I feel like it adds to the aesthetic, adds to I love the way it looks. I actually was skeptical, not gonna lie. I'm a Disney fan. I was skeptical. I was like, they're putting a bunch of LED lights or whatever all over EPCOT, the Spaceship Earth. I don't know about that. I was kind of skeptical. And then once I saw it and what they're doing with it, forget about it. It's spectacular. I mean, just seeing that thing from afar every time I drive by, the shows that they're doing with it, it's spectacular. It's a +1. You might even be able to give it a +2. I probably would give it a +2, except for the fact that they could have done it regardless. It didn't need to shut everything down. So I talked about seating a little bit earlier. I want to go back to that. So there's a bunch of new seating in World Celebration in the garden area, World Celebration Gardens. Lots of seating along the right, on the left. Benches, places to sit, comfortable things in the shade, places to eat. Definitely, that's a +1. I mean, that additional seating all through that space is a +1 for sure. That was one thing that central area there lacked in the previous version of EPCOT. And then overall look and feel. This is going to be a little bit subjective. So this will probably be the most subjective one on the list. The look and feel. Does it look and feel better in that space now than it did before? I guess it really depends on if you feel like gardens were better than the aesthetic that it had before, which is a lot more concrete. There were some garden things there, but it was a lot more concrete. There was the fountains, the lighting. So I used to love the old version of the lights in the ground in that space. So if you remember, on the concrete, there was actually all these cool little designs, these little lights I remember my daughter actually, when she was really little, she was laying down, and I have a great picture of her sitting down on those lights that I will never forget. So that's a core memory for me. Just a spectacular experience. I really loved the lighting in the ground. They did try to replicate that in different places as well, over by the Communicore building. It's actually really easy for me to look at what it is now, and I think it's beautiful now. I love the gardens. I love the lighting. It looks really nice, especially in the evening hours. But it's really easy for me to forget how cool it used to also look before. And as I've been going back through these older videos and remembering what it looked like before, I loved the way it looked before. I love the symmetry with the Innoventions buildings. I love the lighting that ran all along them, the lighting from the fountains and the things that were in the center, all the lighting on the floors. So for me, I mean, really just looking at them side by side, I don't know that it was an upgrade moving to what it looks like now versus what it was, just from a look and feel perspective, to what it was then. I don't think it was an improvement, or at least not a huge improvement. So for me, this is a 0. Like, neither side is getting a +1. They both looked great in their own right. So that's the list. That's the journey of Epcot then. It was great to go down a trip down memory lane to remember all the cool things that Epcot had before. I miss a lot of that stuff. Some of the new stuff is great too. I love that stuff. But if I'm looking back and I'm tallying it up, where are we at? We're at a +6 for then, and we're at a +5 for now. So to me, was it really worth it? Was 5 years of walls, umpteen millions of dollars spent on this, lower guest experience, was it really worth it? I'd have to say no, it wasn't. If I look at the concept art and the things that they were planning to do, would it have been better than it was then? Probably. But where it is now, there's just not enough +1s. Again, you could even say, hey, you know what? You're being a little too harsh. You know, for a diehard Disney fan, you're being pretty harsh. You could argue maybe that it's as good as it used to be, but it's not demonstrably better. So I want to go back to what I said at the beginning, which is, why do so many Disney fans get upset when they make changes? And here's the thing. It's not that Disney fans are upset. It's that they're disappointed. And they have a right to be. So that's it. That's the most objective I could be about Epcot then versus now, about all the transformation at Epcot. I'd love to hear what you think about this. I'd love to hear what you think about Epcot's transformation and the things Disney's been doing. What do you think Epcot then versus now? What was your favorite? What are your favorite things? What are your favorite things that they've added? And do you think I'm wrong? It's okay. You can have your own opinion. That's why I get to do this video, because this is my opinion. But to me, it just isn't better. It's not demonstrably better. And so I think that's what Disney fans are looking for. It's not about getting upset. It's not about don't change stuff. If you're gonna change stuff, change it for the better. And if you can't do that, then leave it alone. So hope you'd enjoyed this episode. Again, let us know what you think in the comments. Like, subscribe, share. Really appreciate you watching these videos. I also want to throw out some credits for some of the archival footage that I was able to use in this video. Very unofficial travel guides, 4K WDW, WDWNT, and Resort TV 1. Check out all of their channels. They're doing great work. You're going to want to see their stuff. Thanks again for joining me, and until I see you next time, the noble way is the easy way. Bye-bye, everybody.